Welcome to She's the Boss, the show that's all about female founders and women doing extraordinary things in business. Now, before we get started, if you like the shows and you enjoy it, I would love it if you would subscribe to the channel, maybe make a comment on it, and definitely like it. But my name is Jules Brooke. I am the host of the show, and I'm also the founder of my own business called Handle Your Own PR. Now, today I am super excited because I've got someone that I know really well and love and adore coming on as my guest. She's the founder of Share the Dignity, which is a charity all about helping homeless women be able to access sanitary products. Well, that's where it started. I think Rochelle will describe a whole lot that it's grown a lot bigger than that now. But let me tell you about Rochelle. Not only is she the founder of Share the Dignity, she was also Australian of the Year in 2018. Or she was a finalist for Australian of the Year. She has been voted as the Cosmopolitan Humanitarian of the Year, and she's also won the Pride of Australia medal. So she is seriously kicking some goals. So welcome, Rochelle.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
It is my absolute pleasure to have you, and I'm dying to hear all about your story, actually. But let's just start off with Share the Dignity. Can you tell everyone what it is, why you set it up, and what it is that you actually do?
So Share the Dignity is a national charity that I started in 2015 when I read an article that talked about how many homeless women there were. I mean, at that stage, there were 48,000 women who didn't have somewhere safe to call home. And while that number is astonishing, what I read further was that they were using socks and newspaper to deal with their period. And I was so embarrassed that I'd never thought that that would be happening in Australia. And I just couldn't believe it was happening. So
Can I just say that I don't think anyone knew that before you actually championed this cause. I think we just didn't even think about them having periods.
Yeah, but you know what I found really sad is that that was not the first article to be written. There'd been previous articles written about the fact that there was period poverty here in Australia. And I don't think that if I hadn't suffered severely from endometriosis and had 74,000 embarrassing accidents in my life, that it probably would have touched me the way that it did. So I back then had my own personal training business and a photography business, and I made all of my clients, all women aged between 30 and 60, who probably thought that they could out-exercise their bad habits, right? So for every wine that they had that month, they had to bring me a packet of pads or tampons. And so I just had them all just bringing me basket loads and saying, just here, just take it. God, I love it.
And then what do you do with them? How do you get them out to all the women?
Yeah, so look, that first collection, I never thought that Share the Dignity would be where Share the Dignity is, obviously. What I wanted was to get pads and tampons and to give them out to the 5 local charities that were in my area. And one of them was Sandbag, a domestic violence shelter, another homelessness centre just over the bridge that collects. But unfortunately, it wasn't like we were giving a woman a warm jacket and it kept her warm for years. It was a monthly problem, and the problem was so much greater than I ever imagined. So on the 1st of March in 2015, I set up, my daughter helped me set up the Facebook page.
Yeah.
That helped show everybody where their donations were going. And so when we went out to the charities and gave them to them, we got pictures, and, really that was kind of it until in May, when a friend who worked at a DV shelter said, can we grab some more pads and tampons? And on this little Facebook page, there was probably 200 local people who, liked it and done that. And then in May, I sort of went, yeah, no worries, I'll do another call out. And on that call out, my life just changed, because it just kind of went viral. And Rusciano picked it up as a Melbourne comedian and shared it and thought, and like me, and like all of us who went, how does this happen? I'm embarrassed. I'd never thought about this. And it was, my initial thing was always, was I solving the problem? Yes, but I just needed to speak to every woman in Australia so that they knew that the problem existed. Because if I knew them like I knew my friends and my sisters and people that I knew and loved, they wouldn't think that that was okay, and that they would just buy a packet of pads and tampons and donate them when our collection boxes went out. And our collection boxes went out in April and August at the beginning, because both of those months started with the letter A, and that was the same as my daughter. And, there wasn't a lot of thought that went into it. It was
right. That was the science behind it. We'll just name
was
it
the science behind it. That was, but it was also splitting it up. I never wanted the boxes to be out like the guide dogs that were there, because really it needed to be a call to action. You needed people to just
You're right, actually. I've
it.
never thought about that with guide dogs, but you do sort of, you don't see them anymore because they're always there. So there's no sort of anything that kind of triggers that, unless you've got sort of 5 cents left and you go, I'll chuck it in there, or the person behind the counter says, do you want to put some money in there? You don't think about it. So okay, so but it kind of happened like this. So you tell me that you do a Facebook group, that it goes off, Rusciano picks it up, and some other celebs do. But what do you do next? I mean, you've got, this is massive. What do you do?
And I was training clients from 5 o'clock in the morning until 12 o'clock at midday, back to back every half an hour. So for me, there wasn't a lot of time to do it. Everything had to be done between 1 and 10 o'clock at night, right, when then I'd be going back to bed, because what happened was that the problem was so much greater than I ever imagined.
Yeah, and now, I mean, now that I know you, it is everywhere, isn't it? And it's not just homeless people either that can't get access.
Yeah. So the pointy end came when, I realised that in order to even collect pads or tampons, and really we only ever did that very first drive in March in our hometown. The rest of it just went to a national charity like that. It was a matter of how. So I remember talking to a woman in Northern Territory who talked to me, who'd contacted the Facebook page. And I remember back in those days that there would be about 200 messages every day of people saying, how do I donate? How do I help? And you know what? At that point, I was dictating, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? Because at the end of the day, we were just making shit up as we went along. It was as simple as that. How do we do it? What strengths do you have? What can you do? How can you do it that way? Share the Dignity really has been built on just a collaboration of people who wanted to make a difference. And I do what I do best, but I certainly don't do spreadsheets best, and I certainly don't do logistics best. But there were people who jumped on the Dignity train, and they all got a role to do, whether they liked it or not. And they couldn't.
They probably were really pleased that at least someone was organising it. But how do you grow from 200 people and pads every few months to, let's actually go to the very tippy point now. Tell me, how big is She's the Big Dignity now, and what are you doing? And then we'll work our way backwards, and you can tell me how it all evolved. But tell everyone what you're doing now, because it is absolutely incredible.
So Share the Dignity is there to ensure that women are afforded the very basic of essentials, like most of us take for granted, right? So we do 2 collection drives a year, in March and in August. And we did change from April, the A month, simply because that April is normally a relatively busy time for in-store for shops, because they've got Easter, they've got Anzac Day. And so our collection boxes that were taking up space on the floor, sometimes I got knockbacks of no. And in order
there's something you wouldn't have even thought of, that because of the retail cycles, you needed to change your collection days. But you weren't just, or these days you don't just collect pads either, do you? Because there's that very sort of well-known handbag, second-hand handbag pre-COVID.
So we do our Dignity drives, we call them, in March and in August. And collection boxes go out all over Woolworths stores and hairdressing salons and chemists and MPs' offices. There's normally about 2,000 collection points around Australia. We've now collected in excess of 2.6 million packets of pads and tampons.
Wow.
It's a really big number.
That's a lot. It is a huge, I mean, I know that it's probably not big enough for you yet, but that is a huge number to have achieved in 5 years.
Massive. But I'm going to give you some sort of context around that. Not this August, but last August was our biggest Dignity drive that we'd ever done. And we did collect just over 212,000 packets of pads and tampons. It was incredible. But to give you some context around that is only enough to help 50,000 women for 4 months. We had 173,000 women turn to homelessness services last year. We had 3.2 million Australians living under the poverty line. After COVID, there'll be 5 million.
Yeah.
50,000 per month for 4 months. It's not like we're giving a woman a warm jacket and it keeps her warm for years. It's a monthly problem. Periods don't stop for the pandemic. They're not interested, right? So
no, and they do go for about 30, and they go for about 30 years as well.
Yeah.
So or more than that. Maybe I'm just getting my numbers wrong. But
Yeah.
anyway, but talk to me also about, you've got all your Sheroes.
Yeah,
you've got all those brands involved. Explain the whole business.
Yeah, so we do those 2 dignity drives, and then we do what's called My Favourite Child, which is It's in the Bag at Christmas time. So that's where we ask Australians to give us a pre-loved handbag or a new handbag, fill it with life's necessities, so shampoo, conditioner, toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, soap, sanitary items, obviously, and then whatever else people put in their bags is completely up to them. So whether that's chapsticks, makeup, sunglasses, earpods, writing pens and paper, putting a note in there, and I'm sure we'll come back to that later. So we do that Christmas appeal, and we ask people to drop them into Bunnings the last 2 weeks of November. And we can only do that because we have 5,500 volunteers that we call Sheroes and Heroes. They are absolute legends. So if they're in
5,500, and I'm guessing, are they all women? Do you have men who are?
We have a few men. We probably have about 50 men and about 5,500.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, but I mean, it's something that we all get.
Absolutely. We all understand, right? It's something that we can be empathetic with, right? So, and they are the backbone of Share the Dignity, because it wouldn't happen in Bendigo or Bundaberg if there wasn't a local Shero who was championing it, who was picking up the donations, getting them to the charities, creating that awareness and that culture of change. So, you know, they are our most prized asset.
Amazing. And then talk a little bit about how it's expanded from just homeless women as well, because that really shocked me when you told me that. I think it was last year, about schoolgirls and indigenous women and things. So can you tell us a little bit about that too?
Yeah. So, well, yeah, this is the eye-opening piece, right? That we thought that we could fix period poverty for those experiencing homelessness. And we probably could if those that were experiencing homelessness was only 48,000 people. But when we talk about how many people there are that live under the poverty line, it's extreme, right? We've got our drought-stricken farming communities, mothers who are teaching their daughters to use ripped up towels. And I'm not talking about the towels you and I would have at home. We're talking about spit-through towels, and that's how they deal with their period, because they have to then throw them away because they don't have enough running water to even wash and reuse them, right? So these are real,
this is real heartstrings.
Yeah,
terrible problem.
We've got Indigenous communities. So, you know, working with the Indigenous communities is probably the proudest part of the work that we do, because it's every girl, every woman, everywhere who deserves to have access to sanitary items. It's much easier for us to help people experiencing homelessness or hardship in our local area. It's easy. We can drop them off. We can get them there. Our remote Indigenous communities involve so much more work to get them there. But for a girl who's living in an Indigenous community, sometimes those packets of pads out there are $11. $11.
It's just crazy, isn't it? I mean, I feel like they should be free. I just, you know, and we'll talk about the tampon taxes as well in a minute. There's so much to talk about with you. But just absolutely incredible and I think you've also said that there are young girls who don't go to school because they don't have any sanitary products at that time of year, or to that time of the month.
That's right. Or their parents can't afford it. So there's that little girl who can't go to school, but there's also, could you imagine the guilt of being a mother that couldn't provide sanitary items to your daughter, and knowing that her missing school is changing the trajectory of her life? Like, it's not fair, right? And as other women, we should be there for our sisters, and really we can be if we just donate a packet of pads or tampons. It's as simple as that.
It's just really such a simple solution.
Yeah,
and you're so clever to have thought of that, because I think a lot of people would have gone out saying, let's do fundraising and let's give money. But I think the visceral idea of giving someone, which we would all do, any woman would give another woman a tampon or pads if they said, I'm stuck. So to ask us for that, I just think it was super smart, because it just gets the message across straight away. Of course, we wouldn't want anyone to be without. We've all had accidents, we've all had leaks, we've all had times when, you're sitting in the toilet cubicle and you're going, excuse me, is there anyone there?
Yeah.
Can anyone help me with one? So it just makes enormous sense.
And when I very first started, you could not Google a picture of a young girl or a man holding a packet of pads or tampons. There was no pictures like that. I'm so proud that now you can Google and you'll see young kids. This picture I saw during August of a little girl and her granddad donating into a collection box. It absolutely melted my heart. But you can see pictures of scouts groups, of boys donating packets of pads and tampons, and girls at netball carnivals, and people of all generations talking about period poverty. I'm super proud of that, right?
You bloody well should be, because it's really, you're an absolute human marvel, I think. So, okay, so let's just stop there for a minute and let's go back to when you were in high school. I bet you didn't say, when I grow up, I'm going to run a charity. So can you take me through what that journey's been, and then take us through the evolution of how you have built a not-for-profit? Because there are a lot of women, I think, who are watching, who I know lots of women myself anyway, who think about starting not-for-profits or have started them, but they don't know how to get it to that stage that you've managed to get yours, which I know partly is probably because it resonates so clearly with all of us. But let's go all the way back to Rochelle as a little girl. Tell me how that all evolved.
Oh, God, that's a long way back, says the woman who's nearly 50. I'm 49 and a half now. So
I've got 5 years on you, and I can think back that far. So come on, no excuses.
Oh, God. At high school, I was the naughty girl. I was the girl that talked too much, who was always class clown, who really went to school to play netball and to go to tuck shop. Really, that's who I was. So I'm
not surprised by that at all, actually. I can picture you.
Yeah, I used to spend a lot of time at the office, and I'll never forget one day, my girlfriend Kerry Foxwell and I were laughing so hard that we were nearly wetting our pants. And the teacher kept asking us what we were laughing at. But when you just can't capture your breath
enough to get it out.
I wish that I could belly laugh like that every bloody day. It would be incredible. And we both got sent to the office, and then we got brought back in again, and then we'd start laughing again. And it was never anything malice. I was just a nut job. But I do remember lots of teachers saying, "Yeah, you talk too much. You're too bossy. You're too this. You're too that." And now I feel like just going, yeah, whatever. Give it to me.
Yeah, well, those are the skills you need, really, in a lot of ways in life. And I love the thing, because I've always been told I'm bossy too and too loud, but I love it that that's now been turned around to you have leadership skills. Yeah. And actually you're very articulate.
Yeah. And, and in hindsight, if they had have harnessed some of that energy into other ways, there could have been a very different Rochelle that came there. But, there wasn't, and everything happens for a reason. And, I've got one daughter who's very much like me, which was extremely difficult to parent. I absolutely understand that.
It's
but
that classic that your mother said. I always love that classic of your mother, and not just you, just mothers saying, one day I hope you have a daughter just like you and you'll see what it's like, and you've actually had one.
Yeah, absolutely. Karma came around. But you know what? As an adult now, she is funny, kind, considerate, just one of the nicest people that I'd like to spend time with. So
I'm sure with you as a mum, that's the only way she could turn out. So were you just obsessed with sport? Did you get straight into sort of personal training from school?
No. And, I have done many podcasts and talk about leadership and netball being a really big part of who I am, and probably where a lot of my leadership skills from. So I'd played netball since I was 8. I still play netball at 49 and a half, right? So, but I also coached netball from the time that I was 14. And the girls that I was coaching, I was 14, and the girls that I was coaching were like 12. So it wasn't a big difference, but it was really just how do you communicate to different people, because they all learn different ways and they all have different personalities, and their personalities were not always the same as mine. So how do you get the best out of somebody, even when you're 16 and you're coaching 14-year-olds? And I think, and every player on that team has to have their own strengths, right? And that doesn't make them better than anybody else. The goal shooter is no better of a player than the wing defence. We've all got a role to play on that.
Oh, what a lovely analogy. We're all pieces of a puzzle as opposed to somebody leading or whatever.
Yeah.
So did you try to get into professional netball? Was that ever a thing? Or
I did play.
What was the big goal?
No. My goal was, and still is, always to get through a netball game without hurting myself, really. But no, I did play rep netball, but I have now had 3 knee reconstructions and waddle a little bit.
3? Oh
yes.
my God, yes. So it might
I
be
know.
time
So
to
I'm
retire
just,
the netball,
trying to buy my
spectator.
time out to the replacement knee. It's getting to that stage. But, I love it. I love putting my netball dress on and going out there and being nobody but Rochelle part of that team.
Yeah, well, that obviously shows in what you've built through She's the Dignity. So, Share the Dignity. Sorry, I've got She's the Boss and Share the Dignity.
It's
confusing in my mind. All right, so moving on. Go on, tell me more.
So I actually left school and I had a job at an accountancy practice even before I left school. So I'd worked at Best and Less when I was at school, Thursday night, Saturday morning. That was the only shop times that were open back then for my $27 a week, which was huge. And that was all to pay for schoolies, really. So it was, and that same value still ticks on. Well, I'm working on this day and I'm going to have my wine on Friday afternoon, right? So, so I had a job in accountancy practice and still friends with one of the other secretaries that started there, and she was a bit older than me. And she was really, Sarah was really kind. She always dropped the ladder down to teach me things that I needed to have and do. And I think maybe she was probably one of those role models in life that you just needed to have at that point. And I think that's why I do a lot of mentoring. If somebody's going to start another charity, I will be the first person to say, I will help you whatever way I can. Because
actually, there's a little lesson in that, and I've never thought of it before you said that not only is mentoring great for the person that's there, but you are totally role modeling it for them. So if you can get young women and help them, then they will naturally think that later on. And I've never really made that association before, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But, she taught, I think probably back then without even really realising, she taught me the importance of making sure that we look after each other outside of school, and you drop the ladder down and you make sure that you put the best in to other people that you can. And so, which is really quite funny because, we're still friends, oh God, 30 years later.
I know, but that's just, again, great testament to you. So you were working with her? Was that what the situation was?
No, I worked for an accountancy practice, which I talk way too much and I'm far too loud, and you have to charge for every 6 minutes. And if you spend 4 minutes of that 6 minutes talking, then that's very hard to charge somebody. So I probably lasted 3 years in that role, which was probably about a year and a half too much. But I learned lots of things of what I didn't want to be and what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. So I was really good at organising everybody, but I definitely was not the person who could sit in a room with figures all day and do all of that sort of stuff. So I was literally a people person. So and then I actually worked for Australian sporting distributors who distributed Puma, Grey Nichols, Prince tennis rackets, and we used to dress the Broncos and the AFL team, and that job was perfect for me. I got to socialise. I got to do. I started in admin, and I ended up being a rep on the road, and I got to talk to people all the time, and it was great. And then from there, I went off and had my babies, and I went back and worked for a little while. I remember taking Alicia with me in a pram, but that didn't work. And it wasn't that I had to financially work because my ex-husband didn't want me to work, didn't think that was the right thing to do. And I probably did it more because he didn't want me to do it in hindsight. But I had to stop it because at the stage when Alicia got to 12 months and she was trying to walk around the office and off you go, and my girls were only 17 months apart anyway. So I literally stayed home with them for about 4 years. And in that time, I actually did my personal training qualifications as well. And so then I went back to work and I worked at Fernwood. So I became a...
Right, you were a Fernwood woman.
Fernwood, yeah. So I'd actually probably struggled with weight my whole life. So Are you
serious? I never think of you as being anything other than slender and fit.
Slender, geez, Louise. I have been 133 kilos and I have been 75 kilos, and everything
right.
between, right? So I can put on 5 kilos by looking at that wine and cheese board over there, right?
I'm so glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, it's a massive talent. And I think menopause is now catching up with me that I actually can't out-exercise that bad diet that all those clients were coming to me for years for. So,
wait, it gets better. That's all I can say.
Yeah. So then I went to Fernwood. I had my marriage broke down, which was probably should have happened many years before that. And then and I feel like I probably had to recreate myself many times throughout my life, but that was a really big turning point for me.
So where were you? So you were working for yourself as a personal trainer, were you, when you read that article that sort of started off Share the Dignity? So when did you decide to go out on your own? Because I just think that there are probably lots of women out there who are thinking, what kind of business could I do? And personal training is one of those ones where if you're good at sport, it's a logical kind of one to do. So can you tell us, why did you decide to go out on your own?
Well, I had two daughters on my own, and when they were going into high school, there was no more after school care. And I knew how naughty I was when I was a teenager, and I didn't want them doing any of that stuff and going over to their boyfriends in the afternoon because my mum was at work in the afternoon. Right. So I knew I'd just get home 5 minutes before her and pretend I was doing my homework at the table. My kids were never getting away with anything because I'd already done that before then. So
I probably hate that about you.
Yeah, they were good girls though. So I wanted something where I was able to pick them up from school and be there in the afternoon. So hence starting my own personal training business. And I had my personal training business, for 7 years. It was a really successful business. I was down the beachfront. I didn't answer to anybody. I absolutely loved it. I loved it. I got to see more sunrises than, I was just really grateful that, everything that I've always done, I've really loved. I've really been really lucky to do that. Or you craft
Well, you are lucky, but exactly, you craft your own luck, really.
Yeah. And so I also had my own photography business. So I'd done...
Oh, tell me about the photography business.
So I had foreshore photography. So I used to do personal training in the morning, and then sometimes I'd probably only do 2 photo shoots in the afternoon at sunset on the beachfront, and did some weddings and did lots of baby photography, but only if it fitted around my family time. So...
All right. So then you see the article and Share the Dignity is an idea. What do you do with your other 2 businesses when this starts to grow?
Yeah, foreshore photography was the first business that just had to go. And I absolutely loved taking photos. And you will see that all of the photos that you see that are Share the Dignity are done by me, that are visioned by me. And I've got women to come and do homelessness shoots with me. But every single one of those women who've done those shoots with me have actually experienced homelessness. So there is a story behind them, and I've actually used them because there is a story to that, but have replicated, what that looks like for them.
It's a very handy skill to have when you're setting out on something and you need photography, because it can be quite expensive.
Yeah, and for me, I see what I want, right? So I can actually picture exactly what I want that picture, and I will take you into that when we get to the removal of the tampon tax. I knew the actual picture that I wanted to go all over the world when we removed that tampon tax. So
amazing.
It's a very big skill set to have.
Okay, so let's move into that area now. So you've set up the charity, and how did it all evolve, and where did the tampon tax, which has always given me the shits, it just seems so outrageous that we got GST on tampons when we have to use them all the time. And I remember that when they first brought in GST. So how did that all evolve?
Yeah, let me just step you back through how did the charity even start?
Yes, sorry,
I didn't even know that when you wanted to collect pads and tampons that you needed to have, you needed to be a registered charity, you needed to have a constitution, you needed to have a board of directors, you needed to have licenses and permits in every state. I had no idea about that. I knew.
Well, neither would I. I didn't realise. So you can't just ask people for things without having all this structure in the background.
Yeah. But do you know what? The fear was that you were doing the wrong thing in order to do the right thing. And really the risk, I'm not really risk adverse, unfortunately. Not my
sign of a good entrepreneur.
Yeah, I don't really play in the risk thing. I'm more, for me, it was always, how do you not do it? right? So how do you, oh, geez, that's a big job. How are you going to do that? Well, how are you not going to do it? Really, that was always my mindset, right? So it was then surrounding yourself with amazing people. And to be honest, I have to take my hat off to my amazing husband, who then had major connections with DLA Piper, who donated $30,000 worth of legal help. So they put together our constitution. Any person that had a skill set was put to work, including the first round of board that we had, and the first board that we're now into our third board, which is more like our high school board. So our first board was, like a newborn board. They were all had small, soft skills, but would never be the board that could fit into what we're doing now. But
right.
The skills that I have now are very different to the skills that I had back then as well. So yeah,
massive amounts of learning.
Massive amounts of learning over the last 5 years have been just a whirlwind, to be honest. So setting all of that up was problematic, but it also was about understanding that you are never going to be great at everything. So surround yourself with people that are experts in their field and get them to do what they need to do. So really
fantastic advice.
To have that. And then when I'm going to move into the removal of the tampon tax, right? So
yes,
we do collections of pads and tampons. And then I was in a Hoysia Lane in a homelessness shelter in Victoria when a woman walked in and I was behind the counter speaking to the manager, and she said, "Can I have some pads and tampons?" to two men behind a caged wall. And he said, "Yeah." Said to the guy next to him, "Where are the pads and tampons?" And he said, "Upstairs." So he went upstairs. She waited there. He came back and he said, "Do you want pads or tampons?" And she said, "Oh, could I have them both?" And this man said, "Can she have them both?" And I'm like, oh my God, just give them to her for crying out.
Exactly.
Anyway, and I realised then I would never have even gone up to that counter to those two men and asked for pads and tampons. So I was so embarrassed for her that she had to stand there and ask. And the understanding of why she had to ask was even really disappointing to me. I'm like, why do we give you pads and tampons and they're upstairs? Why are they not in the bathroom? And, the story that we've now heard many times over is that people will take them and try to take them back to the supermarkets to try to get a refund to be able to buy food. So that's how bad the problem is, right? So I created the world's first dignity vending machine. So it is a vending machine that dispenses a free period pack, and it has 2 pads and 6 tampons, and that machine dispenses those products for free. But what I thought we could do at the beginning was use the donated products that people have been giving, break up the packets, and then make them into these little packets that are specifically made to go into the vending machine. We weren't allowed to do it. We weren't allowed to do it because pads and tampons fell under the Therapeutics Goods Association Act, right? So they're actually deemed medical, but yet they were taxing them like they were a luxury. So what they were doing was actually contradictory.
Oh, I love that you found that out. I never knew that at all.
Yeah, so it was so what I actually did then was went to the university and said to them, this is my brief for you. All of these girls were in their final year of university. Find out all
are these the lawyer? Was this a law course?
They were legal students, and they were in their final year at university. So universities have played a lot of roles in Share the Dignity because they're giving us free volunteering time.
Yeah, fantastic.
So we've used them in many different ways, but in this one we needed law students to come up with what has happened in other countries, how many petitions had been put together since the introduction of the GST on sanitary items, and what if we wanted to do a class action suit against the government for taxing our vaginas, really, because that's what they were doing. So they prepped all this.
They're taxing us for being women in the end.
Yes, absolutely. Remembering that condoms were GST free. So was lubricant, so was Viagra.
I didn't know that either. And what about razors? I always used to say, but I guess razors probably do attract it because they're...
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Sorry for bringing that one up.
No,
the
that's
one
right.
thing that isn't.
But, so it was really getting all of the information so that we could understand what was happening. Then I started to talk to politicians about, how could we see this removed? And then I just got no, that's never going to happen. The GST is a broad-based tax. We're trying to increase the tax, not take it away from things. And I sat comfortably knowing that I needed to wait and bide my time till there was an election coming up.
Right.
But what happened was that Malcolm Turnbull ended up being at a local politics at the pub. And I went along, and because you don't get that kind of exposure, and it was actually the year that I was nominated for Australian of the Year. So I walked in, and I remember the local politician who kind of rolled his eyes when he saw me walk in the first place.
Uh-oh, here comes trouble.
I was just seeing him roll his eyes when someone gave me the microphone to ask Malcolm Turnbull the question. So I posed the question to Malcolm Turnbull and said, my name is Rochelle. I am the founder of Share the Dignity, a national charity that collects sanitary items for women who can't afford the very basic essentials in life. And I would like to hear you explain to me, please, why you think taxing our sanitary items is fair. He nearly choked on his own words. And everybody else that had asked a question before me, he would reply with, thank you, Rochelle, that was a great question, or something. He simply went into sanitary item, GST is a broad-based tax, and I've never heard any noise from any of the states saying that they wanted to remove the GST from sanitary items.
Oh,
and the microphone was taken off me as quick as could be. I'd sent my husband to the other side of the room so he could actually record and videotape my question and the interaction, which you can actually find on our Share the Dignity page. I came home from that exceptionally wild up. I was so angry that he completely dismissed my question in the first place and that he said that he'd heard no noise. Now, that was complete bullshit, because you know that for every year since that tampon tax has been introduced, that there has been a change.org petition every
That's right.
year.
We've all signed loads of them.
We've all signed way too many of them, and we've become tired of it, right? Because we felt like we weren't getting heard. So that meant to me that we couldn't do the same thing that had been done before. I could have set up another change.org, right? But that wasn't getting the action that we needed. So we set up a federal petition, which many people said you will not see that over the line, because federal petitions need to have 100, you need to register it, and you need to get 100,000 signatures in 30 days for it to be heard at a federal level. So this was not society's, it was not society's decision to make. It was the political parties that needed to make that, and we needed to have a bipartisan support, right? It was a really big political game that was played in 2018. I think I spent most of my year speaking to politicians. I spent most of my year making sure that we had all of our ducks in a row. So to get the Greens on board was easy. They knew the comments.
They got it straight away, I'm sure.
We got that straight away. And then in there, I had been to nearly every single politics at the pub that I could go to, any budget reviews that I could go to, so I could ask the same question over and over and over again, and I was speaking to as many as I could. I then went to a politics at the pub where Bill Shorten was, and he was Labor. And I'm going to tell you that I was so politically naive before that. I always used to say to my husband, what Liberal team do they play on?
Oh, no, I'm with you. I'm the same.
I didn't know whether they were Liberal or Labor. If I liked you, I liked you. I didn't really care which party.
And all I know about Bill Shorten is that he really supports disabled people. So I figure he'd probably be on the page. But what happened?
And you know what? He's a husband and he's got daughters. And so when I asked him, and I was very specific that I framed and said exactly the same thing to him as what I had said to Malcolm Turnbull. And when I said that, he literally turned around and said, thank you, Rochelle, for the work that you do. My wife and I were only talking about how expensive periods were last weekend. So whether he already knew that I was coming or something like that, I'd like to believe.
I know, but what a great answer, especially after Turnbull.
It was amazing. And he said to me, I'd love to talk to you after this about that. And so that really started the trajectory of getting the Labor Party on board, which then I had to get every state on board, and I had to meet with every single one of those politicians in every state because they're all state run. So we obviously had an Australia that had 6 states with Labor as their leaders and 2 states with Liberals as their leaders. Then we got Liberals in Tasmania on board, and then there was only New South Wales. So when Labor wanted to come out and have an announcement that said if they get voted in, they're going to remove the tampon tax. I remember getting a phone call from them on a Friday saying, we want you here at our press release on Sunday. And I was like, okay, all right, I'll be there. How exciting. And I couldn't say anything to anybody. But yeah, so to have Labor on board, we had Greens on board. The fight was not over because I wanted it to not be something that was reliant on an election, right? And I knew that each party had their own game to play in order to do what they needed to do, and I needed to be respectful to that at the same time. The crushing point came when I ended up having a phone call with Minister Hunt, our Minister for Health.
Yes, Greg Hunt.
Greg Hunt, who I actually quite like. I really quite like him. He's a great guy.
Okay.
And I know that he's actually plays on the Liberal Party, right? So now I know all of these sorts of things. But I remember having a conversation with him. He was in the back of his car. It was 6 o'clock at night. And I said to him, you actually have the power as the Minister for Health to actually remove this without the support of each state. Did you know that, what I was saying before, that you are taxing them like they're a luxury, but they actually fall under the Therapeutic Goods Association Act, and they are classified medical. So did you know that? And is it not time that the Liberal Party came on board and made a stance and realised that this is the wrong tax? Because what we're looking at a class action suit going down the road if it doesn't get removed. Do you know what? 1 week
You're
later,
very clever.
1 week later, we had 3 bipartisan parties all supporting the work of removing the tampon tax. And on the 1st of January in 2019, the tampon tax was gone.
And you had that amazing photo of you all on the front lawn.
The amazing photo that I, as a photographer in me, knew exactly how we were there at 7 o'clock. It was about -3 degrees in Canberra. And I had said to all of the volunteers who we'd managed to get there on that morning, and we'd met with them the night before, given them all the shirts that we wanted them to do and the briefing of where we wanted them to stand and exactly how I wanted that photo to look. So throwing the pads and tampons up in the air with this massive Axe the Tax banner that we had made, and we were all in our pink shirts, and we had got from previous petitions that big giant tampon.
It was really clever. I just loved that photo. You're very smart. That was the photographer in me who knew exactly how I wanted it to look from a marketing perspective and how to sell exactly what that was. Right. Well, you are amazing. Can you tell me how COVID and the pandemic and the lockdown is affecting you? Because I guess we can't give them secondhand handbags anymore, can we?
Well, yes. Yeah, well.
So how are you working around that, and how can people help still?
Yeah, well, 2020, which we all thought was going to be amazing, right? My 2020 vision does not look like the 2020 we got in front of us, trust me. So we started the year with the bushfires, and about 1,000 bags that we had put aside for Indigenous communities had to go to all of those women who lost their homes and girls who didn't have access to sanitary items or toothbrushes or toothpaste. So our year started off with having to do that first because that was the right thing to do. Then
absolutely.
Then we were lucky that Woolworths helped us purchase enough product to put together another 1,000 bags so that we could get them out to the Indigenous communities, because they're so hard to help, but they're so worthy of helping. So
absolutely.
Then we got to March where our collection boxes were out, and then everything stopped. We had to pull down the collection boxes. We had to make sure that our volunteers, our Sheroes, were safe. And so our collection in March wasn't even 60,000 packets of pads and tampons. So the 3,000 charities that we work with who had requested 150,000 packets of pads and tampons are still waiting for pads and tampons. So women are still going without the basic necessities.
So what can we do, Rochelle? Like I don't want to hear that. I want to hear, what can we do? What's the solution? Yeah. Can we just start sending them to you?
Yeah. So no, donate them. Donate $5. Post them if you need to. But get ready for It's in the Bag. We are looking at It's in the Bag being an okay thing to make happen. So we will need more bags than what we've ever needed before, but we also are sympathetic and empathetic to the fact that, 1 million Australians have lost their job through COVID, and it really affected people in a big way.
And there's 3 million of us down in Victoria still locked up for another 2 months, and we haven't been out since March virtually.
I know.
I mean, hardly at all. It's crazy.
I know. And so we know that we're bringing It's in the Bag to fruition in the last 2 weeks of November. So please, if you can, put together a handbag and drop it in there. If you can't, this year we're actually giving the option of donating $99, where we have got a corporate on board to help us, who will pack that bag and we will get them out to Indigenous communities.
Great. So how do we pay you that $99? Do we go to sharethedignity.com?
Yeah, www.sharethedignity.org.au. And we've tried to make it super simple. Yeah, we've got a big campaign coming out in October called Move for Dignity. So we're asking Australians to walk, run, swim, cycle, get on a unicorn, don't care. Do whatever you can to move for dignity and help us raise the funds and awareness to be able to continue the work that we do.
All right. So even somebody incredibly unfit and unsporty like myself needs to get out and do something to raise some money and to also just draw awareness back to the charity.
Yeah. You know what? Just put one foot in front of the other, and whether it's...
I will. I can walk at least. I can swim, but we're not allowed in pools.
You can do yoga. I mean, our Yoga for Dignity was cancelled this year. Our big high teas were cancelled this year. So everything that we normally do to raise awareness and funds to help us do the work that we do has just all gone down the drain with COVID. So Move for Dignity.
Well, I'm glad I asked the question, actually, because I think that people, we're all thinking about all the ways that it has affected us and possibly not thinking about not only the charities that haven't been able to collect, but also the people that they're supporting, and that their situation hasn't changed or has got worse, and that, so the need is probably bigger than ever, and yet we need to get that information out.
Absolutely. The problem is so much greater than we ever imagined, and post-COVID it will be even worse.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, Rochelle. Wow, you are just one amazing woman, and this charity is so important. In fact, can I just ask, do you call it a charity or should I call it a not-for-profit? Doesn't matter.
Whatever you like. We mean, at the end of the day, we're a business. Yeah. And if we don't have sustainability as a business and as a charity, we will not be around. So like many other businesses through COVID, we need to be here. We need to make sure that we're in the business of helping women get access to the very basic essentials.
Okay, so go to the website, look out in Bunnings for the bins and everywhere else. And if you feel moved and you've watched this, then put a stamp on an envelope and send it up to Share the Dignity with some packs in it there. But any way that you can to support the charity would be great. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rochelle. What a great story. If you have loved this, and I hope that you have, and I hope you actually feel motivated to go and do something, please like, subscribe or comment on this channel, because I'm doing 2 new shows every week with also amazing female founders. I also run a lunch every Friday for female founders if anyone wants to come. And you can find us on shestheboss.com.au. But I would encourage you to go to sharethedignity.org.au as well and go and see what you can do to help. And hope to see you for the next episode.